Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the aBlogtoWatch Superlative podcast. You can listen to our other podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we chat about the latest in watch news and reviews. My guest today on Superlative is once again George Bamford. George, welcome.
Yes! I am so happy to be here. Oh my goodness. I really am happy to be here. I loved our last conversation and thank you for inviting me back. I feel very, very privileged.
But you're a regular. You know that.
I know, but I feel, it's kind of one of those things that you kind of, you feel like, hey, am I ever going to be invited back? And so I'm very, very pleased to be invited back. So thank you.
Not everyone that gets on Superlative comes back. That is true.
Yeah. So I feel very lucky.
Yes. Well, there's so much stuff to talk with you about, especially because I love getting your opinions on things. And right before we started recording, you were saying that it's been such a crazy year for watches.
Yes.
I want to ask you, do you think, and this is actually two questions. One, the collaboration and colorful watch trend will continue? Because now that Omega just came out with a black and white set of watches again, I wonder if we're back to the era of gray.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of do a bit of a rewind and just go, what I want to say is one of the first things was, can you still believe that Kith Formula Ones were earlier this year? And, I feel like this has been the longest, shortest year.
Yeah, that was towards the beginning. That made quite a
impact.
But I think what's interesting is later in the year, and no one really made the connection, was that Tag Heuer essentially got the Formula One sponsorship, the actual Formula One. So first it was the return of the Formula One watch. Then it was a little bit of a hint as to what's next, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then it kind of went ballistic on the back end. And also, but everyone was talking about that and they missed the conversation. Really, I think the conversation that came out was the Marigraph afterwards. So that for me was another conversation that people kind of almost missed that kind of side of it.
And what was important to you about that conversation?
Well, this was another complicated watch by Tag Heuer. And when you look at the Marigraph, I love what the watch did. I think there was a lot of negative about it, but actually when I look at it as a watch, I think it was a very, very good use of the glass box shape, and there was a few other things that happened in that watch. And I think it's really, really good. But I realize also, Ariel, I'm not answering your question. Is this are we going to be facing the black watch, grey watch scenario? And I would say to you is probably, and it's a two-part question. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but the two-part question is, are we going back into the black? Yes, retailers will, if you talk to any retailer around the world, all they want is a black dial, maybe a blue dial, and a grey dial, or a silver dial. When you look at most retailers, because they can sell those colours, when you look at the brighter colours, I'm looking at the Tudor pink dial, the new Bremont pink dial that's just come out, some of the other colours that we've had coming through this year. You look at them and you go, wow, that's amazing. I'd love to have it on my wrist. But then when you go into retail, most of the time you go, yeah, I'll have it in black, because I know I can wear it multiple times. I can wear it for this, and this.
So is it because those colors are too wild, or is it too expensive for the novelty of having a pink dial watch?
I don't know. I think sometimes it is about price. I think it is. You think about when people look at buying cars. A lot of people go for very simple colors of cars, because they think about the secondhand price. And I think sometimes when you look at watches, I kind of always say it connects to you. It connects to, and I love black watches because that's how my business started. But I love color because I think color is fun. But at certain price points, you go, how many times can I wear this? is this a fun watch, or is it a kind of, really clocking on, something I'm going to wear on a daily basis?
Now, you have both the black watches and the colorful watches in your collection, just of your own watches alone, not to mention the things you have. What do you find yourself wearing more often these days, colorful or black, or do you really mix it up?
I mix it up beyond belief. I mean, I even mix it up with brands that I love anyway. I mean, you and I love G-Shock. I've got on my desk a bright yellow G-Shock, and I always have multiple colors of watches on my desk. So I do mix it up. I love color, but if there is a go-to watch, I would probably say, well, this year's go-to watch was a Bremont, the Cali dial. Firstly, because I was up in Scotland and I did that was
the black and green watch you did with them. That was stunning. The second of that type.
Yeah, and it was really, really cool. I've been wearing that quite a lot this year, and I was trying to figure out why I keep on wearing it. And the thing is, it goes with a suit and it goes with a pair of jeans and a T-shirt, and it's
elegant. It's a pretty watch.
So that's why I was kind of and it is a go anywhere, beat anything type watch. So that was where, but. When you're talking about, are we walking away from color? I don't think so. When you talk about Omega, look at how Omega is hinted, the gold one on Daniel Cray's wrist. And there's some watches that are coming out from Omega that are going to be a little bit more colorful, a little bit more fun. So I think it is, what they're doing is they're answering retail very simply and said, here is it's a great watch. This is what we're answering you for. But I also would then say to you is color, you want something, when you look down at a watch, you want it to be fun. You want it to be something that gives you that, time to do something different.
I think that part of it comes from the contradiction of what excites people in pictures online and what they're actually brave enough to wear. And I think the colorful watch trend has really shown that the internet is so crucial in helping people to discover watches as well as get excited by them. Because if you're just scrolling through stuff, you see a black dial, you're like, okay. Yeah. But then you see purple, you're like, wow, that dazzles my eyes. But then you go to an in-store environment or an in-person environment where someone is trying the watch on, and then the whole psychology changes. Yeah. They still like the color. They still think purple's nice. But they don't think that they want to wear it all the time because they feel like they don't know what message that sends about themselves. Because frankly, that's not a color they're used to wearing. Neither is pink or bright blue or whatever, or bright yellow.
I totally agree. And the thing is, what I remember when I was a photographer, and I always wanted to photograph black cars. I always thought it was the coolest thing to photograph a black car on a black.
Hard to shoot.
Very hard, but I loved the challenge. Or dark colored cars. And the person that was in charge of the magazine at the time said to me, you will never have your photograph on the front cover of a magazine. And I said, why? And he said, because you like photographing dark cars. And bright cars are the only ones that pop off the front cover of a magazine. And he said that's always why all these brands bring out these colorful cars, because they will feature on the front of a magazine. Now, we say online or on videos or anything, they will pop off the screen.
Yeah, it's the same type of situation. So I find it interesting how the worlds of marketing and the practical realities of retail intersect. And they don't always get along. There is conflict. And I think another funny thing is you talk about pink, for example, that if like one or two watches do it is successful for them, but then just several months later, everyone comes out of the woodwork with their own shade of pink.
Oh, surprise, surprise, there's a pink watch.
Yeah, and then you're like, wait a minute, now I don't like it anymore. I liked it when it was rare, but when it's not rare, sorry, it's no longer cool.
I agree. I think it's the different iterations of pink that you kind of go, oh, okay. I loved the Tudor one because I just thought that was clever. It was unusual for Tudor. And it was kind of like, for me, I was like, oh yeah, that's cool.
And it was lavender. Let's be honest, it wasn't really pink.
Well, yeah, I agree. But I just thought it was cool. I thought, and the thing is, I saw it on people's wrists. And that's the thing is, it's like some of these watches that you kind of go, yeah, you see it on social and you go, it disappears after that. You know, you never see it on someone's wrist. I saw that Tudor on a few people's wrists. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, there is reality. People, you know, this, the tire has hit the road.
I remember going to Basel Worlds and stuff before the internet really allowed people to know what was and wasn't popular. And the only way to ask the question of what was going to be a hit was as you scan watches, what pops out, right?
Yeah.
Like we'd see trays of watches. It wasn't like, here's one at a time. And we would have to use our own eyes as a measuring tool to know what was going to be like gauche looking and just kind of hideous, even though it's kind of interesting, or that's classy. People are going to want to look at that. And I think that ultimately that was a better tool.
Yeah.
Seeing it, especially when compared to a bunch of other watches, a lot of the times the black one stood out. Like that's the one that you and I, our hand went to. But that seems to be a far better tool than checking out pictures on the internet. And it's funny that your average collector still doesn't seem to understand that behavior. They don't understand their own habits. They still think that they want all those wild things. They still think that everybody out there, if they make a bunch of money, is going to wear a multicolored Richard Mille. No. Even if you have Richard Mille money, I promise you out there, most of you are not going to want to wear Richard Mille. It's cool. It's very cool. Yeah. George, you and I can get away with it. Most people, no, they can't.
Honestly, I'd love to get away with it. It's one of those, it's out of my price bracket, but Jesus Christ, I'd love to wear one of those Richard Mille. I love the weight of it. I love the watch.
Right?
I'd love to, but sadly, totally not on my Father Christmas list this year.
One of the things that I think was also very defining, even though it was a very short moment of the last year, was the Patek Philippe launch. Now, if you talk to collectors, you talk to the people that buy from Patek Philippe and talk to buy from Mr. Stern, their story is very different. He's the nicest guy.
Yeah.
Their story is he listens to us, he cares, he does stuff for us. Apparently, he's very good at clienteling. Yet, the publicity around the interviews shows a completely different story. So the people that buy from him, they're defending him. It's definitely a misstep in terms of, I think, the reputation they want to have. But there's this contrast between his defenders and people that, I guess he's right, aren't his customers right now, who are pretty harsh on Patek. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to take another brand, a British brand that is having a bit of controversy as well, Jaguar. And the reason why I'm taking Jaguar is you think about something on that side. They only want to retain 18% of the original Jaguar customers. So when you look at something like that,
what an odd calculation to come to.
I know, but what I would say to you is when you look at something like that, they need to do something different. The people that were buying E-types are not buying their brand new Jaguars that they've got on the market today, the existing ones. And the problem is that it's a bargain basement kind of brand where Jaguar E-types, XK120s, even the 220 Jags, these were kind of pinnacle cars. So they've had to reset and they've had to jar the environment to make it go, oh, actually, this is something controversial. We want to talk about something controversial. You think about, and I'm getting to the Patek thing because what I want to also say is we talked about Bremont being controversial at Watches and Wonders. And, it was a massive, but everyone talked about it. They're still talking about it. So what happens is you go, okay, we may get some negative. We may, Davide may be depressed or down because, people are trolling him. But what I would say is people are talking about Bremont. And
so you're saying Mr. Stern engineered all this?
No, I don't. I think my biggest problem, and I would say to you, is that the watch, I think they chose the wrong material to launch the watch in.
The material.
I think if it wasn't in steel or white gold or bicolor, if they'd come out with something new from the Patek range, so let's say do it in a wonderful brushed black ceramic, everyone would have gone, wow. And it would have changed. You wouldn't have cared. This would be something that would have been totally different.
So they needed a better story on top of the story.
Yeah, and that's where I think, to my sense on it is, I think this was, I think it's an interesting watch. I've had one on my wrist, and I was like, honestly, it's not something I would buy at the point, but if it came out in black, you think about AP when they first brought out the black ceramic watch, everyone went, oh my God. And, even secondhand prices went through the bloody roof. And that's where I would say on this is exactly the same. If they'd brought out a new, that or tantalum or something that was different, you would have eradicated any of this kind of negative of like square and whatever it is, or even a comparison to the Nautilus, because it would have put it into another stream.
I think the problem with Patek is the game they talk is of a brand that produces far less watches. I mean, they even admit to producing 70,000 watches a year. And yes, that's not Rolex numbers. That's not 1 million watches a year or 800,000 or 1.3 million, whatever it is. But, we know that like the brands that they often get compared to make like under 10,000 watches a year, or even under 5,000 watches a year, or even a few hundred watches a year. So I guess it's an achievement that they make that many watches of decent quality. 70,000 is a lot. But they talk like there's this tiny little operation. Like, if we don't charge this much money, we're going to go out of business. Like, it's sort of a funny way of rubbing value into the consumer. Like, come on, you're rich enough, you can afford it. We don't need to justify the amount. Like, it's a kind of funny thing.
Yeah, okay. On price, I would say, look, that's something that's another conversation. I think on design, I think on some of the things he said, I think, that's what I love about what he said is it's not done by a PR company saying, we're going to stop the interview here. He just carried on. And I think that for me is something that's very kind of...
but he talks like a South American dictator.
No, well, no, you say that. I think it was
this
quite
is
real.
my country. I say whatever I want to.
No, but that's what in some ways, I love that, because you've dealt with a lot of CEOs over the years, and you think about their PR company around them that will say, he said this, we don't want to have this out in the public, please get rid of that. This is, and I kind of love that this just came out and he was just like, yeah, it's out there. There's something kind of cool about it, because
you come from the society that packaged politeness. You have to advocate for something better from the industry.
I don't know. I think there's something quite honest about it and real. And I think that's something, look, you're bringing out a brand new watch. And I think that when a square watch, there is a few things. Quite a few watch journalists have said to me, their biggest criticism is that it's not a square movement in a square watch. And I could agree. You could have a square movement, micro rotors and things like that. But where I think my thing about it is, I think materials would have been the coolest thing out of it. And I know that you're saying, touching on it, you think about when the Nautilus first came out. The Nautilus was a real kind of, screwball watch. People didn't want it.
It was not desirable.
Not desirable. So, and now there is a hell of a lot of square watches on the market at the moment. There is a lot of kind of, comparisons of these brands and these brands and these brands. But what I would say to you is, 20 years down the line, are we going to be seeing this as, a watch that we actually go, oh, yeah, that actually, it stood the test of time?
I don't actually have that many problems with the product itself. Many people are attacking the watch. I think the name is silly. I'm not that delighted by the design. It's just a square Nautilus. My real problem with it is, again, going back to the statements, you admire his freedom, but I would say it's duplicitous. Because this is a person who surrounds himself with yes people.
Yeah.
Okay. Who, as a company, as you know, most of their statements are not true. That the fact that they do everything, the whole slogan they sort of took from the Swiss private banking industry, they didn't invent all that. They pretend that they're open, that they're transparent, they're cool when they're not. So they sort of try to play this game that, oh yeah, we're approachable and because we're so proud of what we do, when they're ridiculously secretive, very closed, aggressively try to take credit for every single thing. And so I think that's, if he would open himself up and say, hey, anyone that's curious about this can come talk to me. I'm going to make sure that all voices are represented in the space talking about the product. I want real people's opinions. But no, they try to curate that opinion so carefully. And then he tries to say statements like that, which just rub it into the world's face that it is so elitist. It is literally the definition of elitism, which it works in some places. But again, in today's society, very tone deaf. You know, again, coming from a polite society, you don't rub it into people's faces.
No, you definitely don't. And I agree with that. But what I would say, there's something about him actually just saying what he said. Do I agree with what he said? Do I think that, there's certain things? I have, my opinion is I think he, I look at Patek and you just go, it's such an amazing brand that, would you have said that? Or if it wasn't a family member that owned the business, if it was a CEO in that role, would he have ever said anything like that? No way. And that's the thing is, it's a different scenario. How
about this? Rolex. Yeah. Let's look at a different company.
He would never say it. He would never say something like this.
Yes. So what I'm saying is the squeaky clean PR image of Rolex, the almost Vatican-like quality of their morals, is something that I think is quite important in their brand, their reputation, how much we respect them. If somebody at Rolex in a high place of authority did something that was childish like this, I think it would be a real tarnish on their image. I think we want Rolex to maintain this, like, okay, you have all this money, but in exchange for that, you have to be goddamn polite and humble. You have to be a perfect citizen. I think we demand that of the powerful.
But do you think it is, we're talking about two truly elite brands anyway, that you have to be on a waiting list to a waiting list to a waiting list to get onto ever owning one. So you are talking about the echelons of upper tier people.
But they don't offer real power. It's just a product. They don't offer like the waiting list for, lengthen your life by 100 years.
No.
At the end of the day, it's just an item. So
exactly.
There's no real power that comes from being on that waiting list or getting your item.
No, and that's what I when you look at it. But when I look at both of them, they are elitist products. They are up there at something, and that's kind of I think to myself is of course you have to respect the top dogs. You have to look at them and go wow.
Why?
But because I think as you said, Rolex has to be the holier than now, and then Patek can do Patek. I think they can do quite a lot because it's longevity of a family. I look at some of these. I recently heard Acquired the podcast that and on Hermes, and you think that Hermes has been going since Napoleon. And, that was when they first started out. And you go, wow, as a family, they've got 6 generations that have been in that business. So the Patek family, or the Thierry Stern and that, you think about where that will go. I think this will be one of those minute little blips on a long trajectory of a business.
Look, I am not anti-Patek. I just want a stronger Patek. I think that this indicates a weakness. I think that companies like Rolex benefit from having a large diversity of voices where people try to act as checks and balances. In fact, I know that happens at Rolex. And when you have the dictator, you have the sort of emperor's new clothes situation where nobody around him or her wants to tell them what's going on. And I think that creates a weakness, and that could create a sickness that can grow and be really, really bad. And I think that we all agree. I mean, Patek has an interesting problem. I remember where they want a future generation to know what a good watch would be like so that they could say, this is enough of a watch to be branded a Patek. Like if everyone today suddenly got wiped out and they'd have to keep making watches, like they really do think long-term. And I think that's fantastic. But when you create an echo chamber of opinion, then I think that you create a fragility that is not conducive to that longevity that you and I want them to have.
Yeah. No, look, a valid point, totally valid point. I do still come back to, I think to myself is, I remember when Patek brought out that Aquanaut, but it was the lab one that had the chiming movement.
Oh, right. It has kind of the slight open work on the dial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought we were going to see more of those type of things. And that's where I would say to you is where I would love to see, yes, the conversation is one side, and that's probably marred the, and maybe added fire to the comments. But what I would say to you is that I look at the design first. I look at that design of it. I look at the thing, and I think to myself is, I would have come out with first, best foot forward. And that's why I looked at ceramic, or I looked at something in another material, because then I would have gone, wow. Or I would have brought out a lab version, something that would have been, something crazy that everyone goes, oh my God, that's Patek watchmaking. They really are reestablishing.
Hey y'all, Peter Cho here from Jack Mason Watches. If you don't know us by now, we are an independent watch company based out of Dallas, Texas, with a focus on building luxury-grade watches here in the United States. I started this brand with other partners back in 2015 to fulfill a desire and passion of establishing our own legacy right here in Texas. With over 20 years of traditional watch design experience in the United States and Switzerland, we guarantee that each Jack Mason watch is 100% designed in-house, and each component of the watch is unique to us. We don't use any off-the-shelf parts, which has been a strict practice since day one. Heading into a decade of business in 2025, we have plans in place to raise the bar and continue to push the boundaries in establishing heritage in Texas and making our mark in American watchmaking for many more decades to come. For more information about the brand, you can visit us at www.jackmasonbrand.com, or you can follow us on social media at Jack Mason Brand, and also find us on YouTube.
Now, I think that that's an excellent point, and I think that what I've learned this year especially is that the real collectors, the people that care about what the brands do, look at great detail at the product and less about what the sort of employees there say. Yeah. And brands can never get away with just making regurgitative models, new colors, put diamonds on it. Like the real collectors really care that they push the boundaries. Yeah. And I think that that's an engine that's there. And I think especially now that everyone has just drilled in everyone's mind, value, 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 value. People really are now pushing, hey, you want me to spend another several hundred grand on a watch? Well, you're going to have to do something fundamentally different. I'm willing to support it, but you got to wow me. And I think that that's the flip side of the sort of equation about all this waiting lists, is that people are now saying, you know what? I actually want to have a return. I don't want to just have to wait and not be wowed, because at the end of the day, this is a hobby and they want to be pleased by their hobby. Yeah. And if they're not made happy by a new dial color, well, then you know what? They're going to take their money elsewhere.
And I think that is one of the greatest things that we can do in life is we can choose. We have the choice to say no. We have the choice to say, yes, we want that, or we don't want it. And I think that is the greatest thing. Yes, we can comment and we can be negative on the comment of buying that thing. But the best thing you can do is choose not to buy, because the greatest thing is you go, actually that watch or that brand or what they have said or how their stance is on this world, we choose not to buy it. You look at what happened to Budweiser. You know, that is a choice. Now, whatever the case is, and I'm not taking sides on this.
Exactly a great product to begin with.
Well, whatever the case is, people have chosen to walk away from it. And, you know, when you look at something like that, that's their choice. It's people's choice. Whatever the case is, they've gone, okay, this is not, you know, and you look at their share price, you look at what happens. You know, now, that is the cautionary tale for a lot of brands.
I agree with you, and I want to take it a step further. And let's begin with sort of the assumption, and I think you'll agree with me, that there's a lot of pretty watches out there that are made well and that are worth the money. The problem is you can't buy them all.
Yeah.
So if you do want to buy a watch, you tend to buy a watch from the company whose personality you like the best. So the question is this: in an era where people are learning about watches online, it's ultra competitive, there's so many brands out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How can brands assert their personality in a way that is more than just, hey, here's our watch, or there's people talking about us? Because I think marketing is obviously where they need to do it, but no one really knows how to do it well. How can brands assert the sort of other side of the company other than the product when they're trying to say, this is how to relate to us?
So I always kind of think back to that first initial conversation. I would have loved to have been in the room with the Philip Morris CEO.
Okay.
When his right-hand man said, we're going to use Marlboro as the kind of the new masculine cigarette. At the time, it was a woman's cigarette. It was designed with a filter on the end. It was designed for a woman.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That was the whole thing. And they went to one of the big ad agencies in America, and they said, "Oh, you know, we're going to do this," and they put the V on it, and the ad agency said, "It's your choice," because at the time there was a lot of cancer coming forward and all those things, but it's your choice to smoke it. And what they did was they created something, as we all now know, the Marlboro Man. And it was a very controversial kind of, when you look at it, it was quite controversial for the CEO to hear that and go, okay, this is where the brand goes. And it was the hard box and all those different things. Now, where I would say to you is, it is about who, what, how. What's the choice to say, I want to be that. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that tribe, or I want to be a part of that community. And I think this watch defines where I am, or fits me into a maverick or a trendsetter, or putting a part of it. I constantly think about that Marlboro Man idea. I kind of think to myself is, people wanted to be, you know, at the time, it was the cowboy. It was the kind of real gruff, you know, this kind of man that was kind of like, hey, I make a choice to smoke a cigarette. And, you know, damn the government that's saying that you shouldn't be doing it, or whatever it was. And I kind of love the idea of that, is we are making that thing to say we want to be a tribe, a part of that group.
So the watch industry has had accidental, you know, Marlboro men. You've had...
Yeah.
You know, or they've done it through a marketing relationship. Bond and Omega, right? Omega doesn't have its own dude in house, so they created a personality that wears their watch. Well, they didn't create James Bond, but they
thank you, Jean-Claude Biver.
Yeah, exactly, and that's been successful because this character, a lot of people know, they can relate to that. There's something about, even if it's a fantasy character, they relate in some way, and that relationship makes them want to act more like that person. Wearing that watch is a way of doing that. You've had all types of watches on characters in television shows and things like that. But very few brands go as far as you're saying and create a personality or set of personalities that they do that for. What would a Bamford man or woman be like?
Well, you know, I'm going through this process at the moment because I think it is something that, you know, I think there has to be something a bit more rugged, a bit more travel, and related to kind of movement. I think that's, and I know this sounds all marketing spiel. It's not. I look at a brand where you want to have that toughness, you want to have that thing. I would also go to you and say, I think the best ambassadors for brands, and this is something is someone like Patrick Dempsey.
Okay.
And the reason why, and what I would love to have, is if you had a celebrity that was part of your brand. So you want them to love the brand, not be a turnstile and another celebrity comes in. You want to have someone that cares about the vintage, cares about, I was very lucky. I've met him twice or three times through Tag Heuer. He talks to me about vintage regatta watches and have you seen this watch? And those are the people that you want to have as part of your brand, that they become the support for your brand.
So this is someone who was a actor, race car driver, and, just general enthusiast of stuff. He's an ambassador of
and very good looking as well.
A very good what?
Very good looking as well.
Well, I mean, that helps, right?
Yeah, I mean, very, very. Anyway,
but that's a rare bird, right? Or you don't have a lot of that.
No, but that's what I'm saying to you is on these type of ambassadors or people, you want them to really embody what you're wanting as a brand, not putting a ticket on a celebrity.
So you're saying it's better to find folks that already embody a character, encourage them to be part of your organization versus create a fantasy one through an agency like the Marlboro Man? Well,
there's two sides of it, and I think that's where I'm having the debate to myself at the moment, is which way do we go? What do we do?
I say full fantasy.
Well,
because the fantasy character can never go away from you and go to another brand.
Yeah. Well, do you know, I'm on my train up this morning, and I was a little bit late. I'm sorry about this because I was playing on AI and saying, create me an advert for the Marlboro Man for the future, and it was quite interesting because it did a Marlboro woman and a Marlboro man, and I just loved the idea of, because I thought, this is such a kind of it's kind of set light into something in my mind.
You introduced me to generative AI. I had no idea what it was until you showed me, and since then I've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit and understood it better.
What a rabbit hole it is!
I remember being wowed because I think most people at this point have seen examples of generative of AI or played with it. For me, I think the most mystifying thing was the user interface, the whole weird commands and how images just pop up. I was just mystified by all of it. You seem to have it all down and you sort of understood it. But I love that we exist in an era where there's a new calculator. That's sort of how I see it. It's obviously a very complicated tool, but for me, it's a new calculator. It allows us to come to answers that would have taken months or just our brains never would have been able to wrap around. I think we all agree that nobody wants AI design stuff in lieu of humans, but it's a tool to get us in the right place to push us. It's great.
Honestly, it brings you to a point where it gives you a new starting point. And that's what I love is it jump starts teams. I've got a meeting with my design guys and marketing today. And I was like, where do we go? What do we do? And how do we do it? And I'm getting stuff down on a page quicker. So that's kind of my thing.
I want to explain to people who may be not familiar with the creative process. Let's say George he has his brand and he imagines like a food item he likes. It's like, I wonder if this food item and this aesthetic would work with a watch. Like maybe, maybe not. So traditionally, he'd have to himself think about it, maybe have an imagination, ask a designer to make mock-ups, maybe ask multiple designers to make mock-ups. And it would take a lot of time and money before he decided this is a dumb idea or I want to go forward with this. Now, he can basically take a computer tool and be like, okay, could you just merge these two things in a few different ways? Show me what it looks like. And then I'll be like, yes, my hunch was correct. That is cool. Or no, I don't know what the hell I was thinking. Move on to the next topic.
It telescopes
That's
time.
what it allows it to do. Agree, disagree?
Totally agree. It telescopes time, and
Telescopes time. Okay, cool term.
You know, and for me, that's the greatest thing. Is it really does it gives me that thing of saying, actually, I can have more time, actually focusing on what is the good things, and also the other thing is, because I'm dyslexic, it's quite getting sometimes my point of view across slows down, and sometimes how I explain things aren't as literal, or you know, I don't use the right words to describe something, and so then someone will go away and say, oh yeah, I got George's idea, but they don't actually know exactly what I'm talking about because I haven't explained it or articulated it in the right way. So that's also the other way, is I can then put it in, and I can spend, you know, my train journey every morning is about you know, door to door, it's about 2 hours, so I can play for 2 hours, going back and forth until I know this image is what I like. And then I go to my meeting in the morning and I'm like, guys, you know, this is what I like. Or let's say pink and green, or whatever. These are the colors that I really, really connect to me.
Now, because you're an art lover and a design lover overall, I want you to consider this topic. In the age of AI and generative AI, something is going to be dead. And that is what I call essentially the mashup. The mashup used to be something that was intellectually interesting because you could not auto-generate it. An artist had to be familiar with two worlds and had to combine those worlds. And we love that stuff. Now, AI has commoditized the mashup. Yeah. Right? So the novelty that came from combining two things you liked into some new thing, which was amazing for generations, is now...
It's like, see a race car on Mars, you know, let's see like whatever on Mars in that. Doesn't that look freaking cool? And everyone goes, oh my God, yeah. You know, now within less than a minute, you can see that.
Right. So the commoditization, meaning how cheap it is and how quickly you can do these mashups through generative AI, which essentially is a mashup machine, means that the whole idea of a collaboration has to change, right? Because humans want something that machines can't do. We want something only another human can do. So these tools have allowed us to create something very easily, but now the envelope needs to be pushed more. So I think that these collaboration watches have to be more than like this world times this world equals boom. They have to be more.
Look, you know, so someone said to me, we have to be better. And it's not that. We just have to ask the question in a different way, or we have to answer the question in a different way. And that's, you know, it is that thing. We've come to maybe a turning point. We know that with shopping. We know that with everything at the moment. You know, this year the watch world will say that it's been an okay year. It hasn't. It's been a tough year for the watch industry.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
And so when you look at it, what we have to do, and you talked about pink dials and we talk about certain watches, you have to have something that really, we need to be better. We owe the consumers a better product at a better price. And we also owe it to people on collaborations. We have to have the bizarre collaboration. We have to have the gem that's inside a brand that, you know, everyone would go, you should be doing this. But you want to look at something else that is another gem. And that's what I think is the great thing is you have to trust your gut, your what is the watch that you want? What is the watch that, you know, and as a collaboration that works. I think that there has been some amazing little collaborations that are very big ones, but, you know, you think of Timex has done some quite interesting things with the minute finger rings. I think it was Timex, yes.
And Casio now.
Was it Casio? Casio did it.
Both did, I think.
Okay, it was with I can't remember the brand. My brain's just gone, but it's all the circles. And anyway, I just loved the idea of those rings. It was taking something and saying, let's do something different. I think that, you know, when you look at a lot of the brands, they're going, hey, we should be doing something in this lane, and you want to do something that's in a different lane.
I agree with you. I'll put it in slightly different terms. And Good. I think for me, the operative word is not innovation, but inventiveness, right? Because AI is really good at churning up things that have already existed.
Yes.
Only we know what is outside of their large language model, right? Only we know what doesn't exist yet. And maybe the answer to something that doesn't exist yet ends up being stupid. But once in a while, it's really cool. And we're like, I'm really glad someone invented that because I didn't even know I wanted it because it hasn't even existed yet. So that is where we need to push. Now this brings me to another question. Inventiveness is what we want to see. It's how design and product evolves. But commercially speaking, inventive products fail for the first 2 decades. So how do we bring it in an era where people need to buy right now?
Yes and no. I think, when you talk about inventiveness, I'm going back to Man Ray and his rayographs. And this is a photographer. He developed this duality on printing that was absolutely amazing. And it changed. Everyone was like, they had that jaw drop moment of when they first saw a rayograph, they were like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And I remember when I studied being a printer and I was learning how to do it. It was quite a simple system, but it took someone that overlaid a positive and a negative into the image and reprinted it back through. It would, and seeing it first come alive, that for me is something that I think is AI won't. Those happy accidents may not happen because we need to be kind of failing fast. You think about some of the products that happen. I was thinking about even down to something like Facebook. We talk about Facebook and how that happened, but actually that was a happy accident. It was a fail fast, move on. It was hey, this could work in this way, and now look at it as a behemoth of a business. And I think that is one thing that I think AI won't be able to do at the moment. I put it at the moment because you never know how quickly it will move on. But I do think that's one of those things that I look at these happy accidents. I look at that creativity. You talk about innovation and these innovative products that take a long time to get through to the world, and
the inventive ones.
The adopting over to it. And I would say to you is we're seeing quite a few inventive products in the watch world, and they have cottoned on very quickly. They've jumped onto it. You look at the Apple Watch. Apple Watch was a kind of left field thing, and now you see the majority of people wearing an Apple Watch.
Was it really left field?
I think it was left field. I think it was that beam me up Scotty type Star Trek idea, digital watch. It's something that you would take off at night and put on charge. Every year you would replace it for the latest whatever.
I think the world has been wanting a product like that for over 100 years. They've just been waiting for it.
Yeah, but then, you think about some other products that people have been wanting and they haven't worked.
Like what?
Well, something you and I have a wonderful chat on is the Google goggles.
Those are being picked up.
No, the Apple.
Yeah. That's the future. Wearable optical smart devices. But that's
I think glasses, yes, maybe. But I would. But what I'd say to you is something like that. I would also say, this the weird and wonderful, the brand new IWC the Gregorian calendar is on it. I think that is weird and wonderful. I think that is crazy. It's well-deserved, the GPHG. But I look at something like that and I think it's already got consumers. It's already, I was at Formula One in Singapore and someone was wearing that watch and I ran over to him. I didn't know who the hell he was. And I was like, tell me about it. And he was like, it's Kurt Klaus's original, like, I love the, perpetual calendar. And this is the
So he knew
pinnacle.
The whole story.
And he told me the whole thing.
Awesome.
And I went, wow. Now I'd met someone else and he just went to me and said, yeah, it's the ultimate flex, isn't it? And I was like, I like the guy in Singapore and that, but I can't say that in that way. But, you know, it was one of those things where this person really embodied why he brought that watch. And that's where I would say to you is in the watch world, we are starting to see some of these things that are really, you know, innovative design, innovation on shapes, but also, you know, some things that we keep on now going, actually, we've seen it before. You know, there's quite a few watches that go, oh my God, we've come out with a such and such, I don't know, such and such way of telling time, but actually it's come out before and the internet has changed that for us.
Do you remember the original slogan of Grubel Forsey?
No, I should.
Inventors inventing inventions.
Oh, yes.
That's how people need to be thinking. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
You mentioned Formula One.
Yeah.
Do you think Rolex lost out? Again, I'm not saying they should have spent more money by any means, but I'm asking you if you think that for the period of time that they will not have that sponsorship, they probably will get it back in the future. Do you think that they will lose something?
No, I think. Look, I think the interesting thing is that they didn't need it as much, and that's the thing where I look at it. They didn't activate it as much. You saw them on the race side with some of their customers. They didn't, you know, it wasn't as kind of full on as where I think that TAG will go or the LVMH group will go. I think they will interact in a better way. I think they will be a participant, more a part of it, and I think they will be part cheerleader, part true business colleagues. And I think that's where I think the other partners that they've had over the years may not have activated in this way. You know, I feel sorry for Hublot back in the day of losing, you know, because I think that there was a few missteps, but I think that for me was one of those things. I loved the advertising. I loved with that car coming through with the big sign with the crown there. I thought that was clever, but I think it was never, I don't know. I always think about their Pan Am type image with the watch. I think that for me was their cleverest advertising.
You make a very interesting point that I actually hadn't considered until now, but I think it's very relevant to this entire situation. And that is that other than having their logos everywhere, building it to some advertising, bringing some VIP customers and stuff like that to some Formula One events, Rolex didn't do too much to help Formula One. Rolex didn't make a bunch of videos. Rolex didn't bring a bunch of celebrities. Like, Rolex just assumed Formula One was doing its own thing, said, here's our money, and we'll just be part of your stuff. Whereas a relationship with LVMH probably is founded on a lot more mutual effort rather than just exchange of money. LVMH is going to sex up Formula One by having a lot more brands associated with it, by doing other things, product collaborations, events, a lot of media, bringing people out. I think the idea is that there's going to be a more mutual exchange, as you said, George, and I think that goes into it. It's a shame that Rolex didn't do that. They're not really as set up to do that. But I can see how a Formula One would be more excited about an LVMH and what they could bring to the table. And a Rolex that doesn't want to budge on price, which I can completely understand. It doesn't seem like it was that big of a negotiation. But Rolex seemed to replace it with sailing. Is that the answer?
I don't know. I think they've got their Yachtmaster 2 out. I think there is. I think I go back to that continuation of marketing. Back in, 2008 was the biggest jump that Rolex ever had was on from about 2008 when the recession hit. They continued their marketing and they didn't shut down the business. Where a lot of the watch brands started shutting down, they carried on because they'd got some very good reserves. I look at something like that and I think, you know, I think it is a misstep pulling out, but I think it is to the credit. It's like Tag Heuer will be, or let's say LVMH will be, the luxury version of Red Bull doing its crazy kind of tricks and all those things. It will be the luxury version of that. That's what I would hope it will be doing in Formula One. I think that, if you want a brand to just give you money and be a kind of like, hey, we'll put a clock on the wall, I don't think that's the deal that is in place now. And that's my thing. I think when you look at sponsoring of anything, you have to look at what does it bring? Is it brand positioning? Is it customer relationships? Or is it just we own all of these sports? And that's where I look at what's happening now. I think in a luxury way. But this is from my humble, and I'm saying humble, but from my opinion, I think it will be very good for F1 because it will raise that luxury side of it, and there will be something that you'll go, wow, this is something different.
I suspect that Formula One may have actually gotten too big for Rolex. If you look at a lot of their sponsorships, they like to go tiny. They like to go to small, relatively elitist, really not huge events. Formula One, until recently, was, at least in North America, like very niche. Most parts of the world, it was like yacht racing, a rich person's sport. Yeah. Then Formula One tried multiple times, finally succeeded to break out, got popularity similar to more, we'll call them blue collar sports.
Thank you, Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big part of it. But I think that there's an argument to be made that Rolex is actually happy to walk away because they're like, too much for us. We actually want something a little bit more elite and high end.
No, I think I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting. I would love to have just heard how they discussed it or how long they discussed it for. Was it a 2-minute meeting and we're out? Or was it kind of 6 months of going, well, yeah, we could stump up a little bit more, or we could do this. I'd love to have known the whole process because that would have been so cool to understand. I mean, that's the type of stuff we want on the next Netflix show, right? Yeah.
You mentioned that 2024 was a hard year. It was. I mean, look, the era of people having a lot of extra money and being at home has ended. The era of a lot of people feeling particularly amazing about the future is on hold.
Yeah.
A lot of growth industries stopped growing. A lot of things just sort of came to a creaking halt. A lot of uncertainty. And I think what's been impressed upon me in this year more than ever before is just how important politics are to the fate of the luxury industry. When we go to like the big major trade shows, they do everything possible to make sure it's like we're in a casino. We don't know it's day or night, what time it is, what's going on in the world. It's just all the sort of fantasy playland, which is fun. Yeah. But the performance of the watch industry throughout its entire existence has been so intrinsically linked to political sentiment, optimism, confidence. People feel like they're on the winning side versus the losing side. And I wonder if this is an inflection point for the industry to somehow pivot and make light of this, or should it still just ignore this fact in its communication, even though that every element of his performance is entirely susceptible to changes in the mood?
So I got told something that was a bizarre fact. It's something in the region of 27 elections and 3 wars we're in this year.
Okay, it's a lot.
So you think that we're going through 27 elections. Actually, Germany's, I heard, is potentially going through an election soon. So you're kind of going at maybe 28 elections. You look at anything, that's turmoil for a country. That is, people want change anyway. They want a difference. They want something. People don't like that their eggs are costing more than they should cost. They don't like that, And I would say to you is the watch industry has been bad. And I think this is a mea culpa on my side, but a mea culpa on everyone's side in the watch industry is there has been a greedflation. Instead of, yes, this is the cost of employment and this is the cost of this, and this is why we've increased the price by X. They've gone, yeah, actually, we're going to chuck on X plus X plus X, and that's what we're going to be putting on there. You think of overnight, the luxury industry, not only the watches, but the luxury industry has jumped up a hell of a lot. The one thing I will say to you is there was one or two brands that have been very clever at not doing it, and that's brands like Ralph Lauren and there's quite a few US brands that have actually kept their prices quite sustained at a certain price. Now that for me is interesting. Tudor, I think, is the other brand that has kind of sustained its prices to a degree. To a degree, I know that you give me that, have they? But I think to a degree they have.
I mean, compared to some others, yeah.
And I think that is the reality is that, when you look at certain prices, you go, I'm not going to pay that for that now.
Now, earlier in the conversation, you offered the wisdom that if you don't like a brand and their personality, then you go to another one. Is it the same situation here? If you don't like the price of a watch, even if you really admire the watch, is the wisest thing to do to just take your money elsewhere?
Well, that's where the independents have flown into those price points. I would say to you is if you look at some of the great independents, you look at Christopher Ward, he occupies such a great price bracket. You look at Baltic and some of those brands that are doing some really great things at really good price brackets. Brew, I mean, I can list you loads of brands that are sitting in those brand price brackets that you go, wow. Okay, so they're taking, and if I was sitting in the CEO as a Swiss brand, I would be going, actually, my lunch is being taken by some of these independents. The people are making a decision to pay $1,000 or $2,000 for such and such a watch, and they've got the happiness out of that, and people are making those decisions.
So what's happening, instead of maybe them becoming more competitive, is the opposite route, where we go, funny full circle back to Terry Stern. It was like, I don't care if there's good watches for cheaper. I know my customers. They're happy to pay a little bit more because we all love each other. And that attitude taken to an extreme means that you've suddenly not just priced yourself out of a market, but you've marketed yourself out of a market. Yeah. And I think what's interesting is that you are actually quite unique in this, that you are someone that can afford a lot more, but your interest is in fun tool watches. And I wonder, give advice to other collectors. Some collectors, in their minds, they've got to the top. They've got to the most expensive watches, the best decorated watches. Help them rediscover under $10,000, even under $5,000 watches.
I could go even lower than that.
Yes, you could.
So I'm going to say to you is, I was talking
trigger that in their brain. Get them excited.
I was talking to a collector recently, and they were talking about Universal Genève, and they said, we've just discovered this brand, Universal Genève, and I went.
You missed that train.
I'm like, George Kern is freaking amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I said to them, have you actually looked at the Silver Shadow? Have you looked at the Golden Shadow? And they went, what do you mean? And I said, well, they're 600 to maybe 800 pounds on eBay. And these are designed by Joe Argenta, Universal Genève watches. And I'm like, they are so cool that when you're going to talk to someone, you have got actually something to talk about, not how great is this watch that I've seen millions of times on so many collectors' wrists. You have got something that's so unique. Then let's go to weird and wonderful Seikos. This is my new obsession is Seiko, you've got the sprint timers, you've got some amazing things that you get really good bang for your buck, but you also get people going, I haven't seen that watch before. I like that. I love that. Oh my God, that's cool. Oh, that's unusual. And that is where I would say to you is it's re-enlightened me and made me go, wow, there is another rabbit hole to go down, but it's a rabbit hole that is not going to blow my budget. And that's what I love about it is you can, let's go and do something even tangentially to this, go and look at stopwatches. They're not a fortune. And you look at stopwatches and they are so damn cool. So,
and they make fun noises too.
And they do, and they're cool and they're different. Or, looking at different designers. And that's where I'm saying to you is there are certain designers, we constantly are on this what would I say, love affair with Gerald Genter. But then you look at Sapper, you look at Ream, Dieter Rhymes, you look at some of these designs that have come through on watches that you go, yeah, they're cool. And then there's some other ones, the person that designed the Freak. And, you look at some of the people that designed certain Tag Heuers. You look at these designers and you go, actually, there's some really cool things out there. So I think it's more, use the internet for the benefit of not saying, I'm buying a 10 grand watch. Think about how many other watches you could discover for 10 grand. And, flip them out. You wouldn't worry if they go up or down to a degree. If it's a couple of £100, you're going to go, okay, but I love it in my safe, or I love it in my drawer, or I love wearing it, and my arm's not going to be cut off when I'm walking around London.
Great advice, George. We're over time. Last thing I want you to mention.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, this is why you come back on the show.
I love chatting to you, so it's kind of.
2025 is going to be a big year for your brand. Just very quickly, let people know about some of the things they can look forward to from the Bamford Watch Company.
So next year is going to be a bit of a belter. We are Bamford London. We're going to be launching at least 3 watches out of Bamford London. One of them is going to be a dive watch, and then there's going to be 2 other watches. And then I have got some very good brands, some I've never worked with before, and I'm really excited to be showing them. Starting off in the beginning of the year, then there will be an existing brand that we already work with, or 2 existing brands, and one of them I'm really excited about because the design is awesome. Actually, all the designs are awesome. I should never say that, but these are all the things where I always say, got to connect to the heart. They're the watches that I want to steal. And yeah, 2025, if it goes how I hope it will go, I think people will be pleasantly surprised with what they've seen from us. A few jaw drop moments, I hope, from one brand I've found a watch that they do that I think is damn cool, but is not really pushed out into the world. So that's where I'd look at it. But starting off with a dive watch early doors with us, with Bamford London.
Very exciting. And remind everyone where they can learn more about Bamford London on the internet and yourself.
Yes, on Instagram, Bamford Watch Department or Bamford London, and our website's bamfordlondon.com and bamfordwatchdepartment.com. The thing I will also say is, Ariel, I love chatting to you. It's such a positive. We're on Thursday. It is Thanksgiving. I'm sorry to kind of. He's given up part of his Thanksgiving day to come and chat to a Brit. I mean, that's kind of quite amazing. But I would also say is thank you so much. I always say this is we are lucky in this world. You're listening to this probably in your car. You've probably got a cappuccino sitting next to you, and you're listening through your speakers in your car. You're doing better than most people in this world. So I would say to you is thank you for listening to this, and thank you, Ariel, for having me on.
The Thanksgiving welcome from George Bamford.
Thank you.
This has been the Superlative Podcast. Thank you very much. Thanks, George.